Hello again. So I'm recording my voice over the video, the sound of which I forgot again. And the object of today's lesson is the subjunctive, which is not such a difficult verb tense when it comes to the English language. What is difficult is that it translates very differently in French. Many times we'll see different translations. It's not always the subjunctive as you know it, which should be in its form simply the base form. The base form means it's your verb, nothing added, just a naked version of the verb. It's a verb on which we do not add any form of third person or past, simply the verb. So it might seem very easy to you and very similar to the present. So, well, I don't see the difference when I say I write or you write. Well, true, it looks like the present. You're absolutely right. But when it becomes very different and a bit shocking to my eyes, and in my view, is that when you use a verb like be, you realize that you do not conjugate that verb. So it would be I be or you be, which is a bit of an eyesore. Let's have a look at an example. If you say, I recommend that he write a letter, or you write to them. Maybe that's not shocking to some of you, but we would be expecting an S at the end of this write if it was in its present form, say he writes. We know this is a subjunctive because we have used the verb recommend, which triggers the use of the subjunctive as it is a form of order or strong suggestion and piece of advice, and that's why you would remove this S, and it would not be considered as a mistake. If you do not add this S at the end, we would not think, oh, this student forgot his S with the third person singular as a subject. In order to form a negative sentence with the subjunctive tense, all you have to do is add a not in front of the base form. Not that natural, so be careful with this. You would say, she had insisted that he not come. That looks very unnatural, as if something was missing, as if we were expecting an auxiliary, but all you're doing is just placing your not in front of your base form. Now, more interesting is when to use it. When do you use this verb tense? The first instance in which you use this verb tense is after some adjectives or verbs which express a request, so something you ask, a request, or an order, or a suggestion. I will give you an example to show you what I mean. Verbs expressing those ideas, request, order, suggestion, would be ask, demand, or again insist, or propose, recommend, that we used in our previous example, request, of course, suggest, because, well, suggestion with the verb suggest, it makes sense here. So you would use the subjunctive tense as well if it followed certain adjectives which carry the same value as those I've mentioned earlier, such as essential, vital, important, necessary. Or when you say I'm anxious that he do that. You wouldn't say I'm anxious that he does that. I'm anxious that he do that. So these are what I call the triggers for the subjunctive tense in English. Now be careful, because in British English we tend not to use the base form, but instead we prefer using should or sometimes even another model, or sometimes the present simple as well. And I'm thinking about a few examples, but for example, I recommend that he should write is what we would say in British English. So the British English has like to add this should or this present tense in order to add. Well, the present tense doesn't show much, but the should adds this idea that there's a subjunctive, that there's something going on this verb. So I recommend that he should write. I recommend that he writes a letter, for example. Right? So you would add something visible for the person listening, for them to see that there's a subjunctive and that this is happening. Right? So I don't know the two examples I gave you if they're telling enough, but all I'm saying is that if you want to use the subjunctive, I'm addressing the students who are taking especially multiple choice questions. You would have to go for the American version, which is the base form, and not the British version. So always go for the American version if you don't know which one to choose. Right. Now, there is a second reason for using the the subjunctive. I'm trying to while away the time because I don't know what the next slide is. It's very difficult to record your voice over a video, pre-recorded video. So the second reason for using the subjunctive is in conditional sentences, such as if that be the case, which is very similar to something along the lines of if that is the case. You could say, if that is the case, that is correct. But most of the time with conditional sentences, we favor the subjunctive. It's more formal. So if that be the case, or may that be the case, but those are basically conditions. So may it be, or if that be the case. As you can see, if shows that this is a conditional sentence and be is not conjugated. It is in its base form here. Another one that you may have seen already, we have come across that one before, it's whether it be. Whether it be. It could be this or this, no matter what it is. Actually, it's not what it means. Whether it be is if it's this or if it's that. Okay, so you're left with a choice, whether it be. Now, the third reason for using the subjunctive is with stock phrase, which are set phrase. Be careful, the word phrase doesn't mean sentence. It means like a segment, a short expression. We use it a lot with if need be. Call me if need be, basically if you need me, if need be. Another example is come what may. Well, come what may, I'll go on holiday. So whatever happens, come what may, we'll see what happens. Come what may, I'll do this, I'll do that. Or be that as it may be. Is another way you could use the subjunctive. Or be that as it may means, well, since this is that way, be that as it may. Another expression we could use is suffice it to say that, or which means it's enough to say that. So suffice it to say. I'm not gonna lie, we don't come across this, and this sounds very formal, but still, this is a case of subjunctive. So all you would have to do here is to remember them. They are very often used in sentences you may have heard before, such as long live the Queen, which means may the Queen live long. So long live the Queen, or heaven forbid, like oh my God, heaven forbid. Or another example that you know obviously is God bless America, which is an equivalent of may God bless America. So God bless America. All these are stock phrases. All I would recommend is learn them by heart. Right. Now, there are alternative ways of translating a French subjunctive in English, and we would use many other ways than the subjunctive I have just explained. We would actually not use the subjunctive. I'm thinking about the modal past, for example. We have already mentioned the modal past with some phrases. This is a past that doesn't refer to an event that took place in the past and that would be broken off from the present situation. It's a past that shows you are cut off from reality. So let's think about an expression like I wish, not I wish you a happy Christmas, but I wish something, I hope for something. I wish it were a holiday today. You are projecting yourself in a hypothetical world which doesn't exist. It's a surreal world in which you would be on holiday. And that's when you use it were. This is the only case in which be with the pronoun it will become were. It's because you use it in its modal form. Otherwise, it would be I wish it was. A lot of people say I wish it was. So I wish it were. Right? If I were you is if I were in your shoes, I'm projecting myself. This is not a real situation. Another expression that triggers this form of modal past that has a subjunctive quality to it is suppose. Suppose it came. What would we do? We don't have anything to eat. So suppose it came. Suppose is obviously something you imagine. Or it's time we went. Which basically means that we are still here, but we are projecting ourselves and we should go. Like, this is the moment we should go. It's time we went. So once again, you are breaking from reality, projecting yourself in a world in which you would go, right? Which is not the case. Another alternative to translate the subjunctive is should, and many students for some reason think that the subjunctive is should, right? It can be in some instances, in some cases, but not always. Most often we come across should as a subjunctive when it follows lest or for fear of, which means the same. Lest is something you see around the month of November when we remember the soldiers who died during the First World War. We say, lest we forget, which is the normal way of forming the subjunctive, but you might say, lest we should forget. So once again, this refers back to this British form of British form of subjunctive, right? Another example is when you use in case you should come. In case you should come. Actually, we could even say, should you come? And this is the reason why sometimes we use should instead of if, right? Should you come? In case you should feel this, in case you should do that, or so that he should feel, so that. I did it so that he should feel instead of for him to feel. I did it so that. So remember that some words, once again, are they necessitate the use of the subjunctive, right? So lest, for fear of, in case, so that. Try to have this list of words, and as soon as you use them or you come across those words, you know that you will have to use a subjunctive. This is how you use the subjunctive here. So I don't know what's happening on my screen. I'm waiting for the next the next slide to come in because I've said everything I had to say here. I'm going to be silent and let you take notes. Right? Another example now, which at least another alternative for you to translate a subjunctive, what would be a subjunctive in French, but which in English will be translated differently, is to use may or might. Very, very common when you use concession. So strange as it may be, is something you know about. However nice he may be. You don't have to use this maybe, but it's much better if you do, right? You could say however nice he is, but we say however nice he may be. And concession is the perfect example when you would use this may or might in order to use or to translate this subjunctive. Now you may use might or may indifferently. It really doesn't matter as long as it's here and it translates this subjunctive. Try as I might, something we say as well. So however hard I try or however much I try as I might is would be translated anyway as a subjunctive in French. Now, another really strange case is when you use the gerund. So this is very advanced grammar now. If you said, do you mind in French would be followed by a subjunctive. And in English, we would use a gerund form. So you would say, do you mind my smoking? Which is pretty much the same as if you said, do you mind if I smoke? Right. So do you mind my smoking? Mind is a verb that is followed by a gerund, naturally. And because we are not talking about just do you mind smoking, that would be about, you would be addressing the person about their own smoking. But if you say do you mind my smoking, you add an information about who is responsible for the smoking. Do you mind if I smoke? You will hear sometimes people say, do you mind me smoking? But it's better to use the possessive pronoun here, because when you add ing to a verb, it turns into a noun. It's a noun phrase. So sorry if it's too advanced for some of you, but do you mind my smoking is a very advanced way of translating this French subjunctive. And then the last one is the indicative form, and it's used with certain words such as though or before or until or unless. These are the four words in which, after which, in French you would use a subjunctive, but English will simply use the indicative form, which means that you would not do anything to the verb. You would conjugate that verb the normal way. That's what it means. So if I give you a few examples, I won't leave unless you agree. And this is a French subjunctive if you translate this, but in English it would just be the verb in its indicative form. So I won't leave unless you agree, or though he did not understand anything, though he did not understand anything, I gave him extra points for trying really hard, for example. So all you do is though he did not. So this is just the normal way of conjugating the verb. Or I will call you before you leave. Before you leave is a subjunctive in French, but in English it would simply be the indicative form.